Shimon held like Rabbi Akiva. Oh, I'm going to get it wrong. You have to record it. All right. So we're starting now on the top of Ayin Beis Amid Aleph, the first word. Umi Motzis Mukma Sleila Reb Shimon to Rabbi Akiva. Can we really say that Reb Shimon's view is consistent in every regard with Rabbi Akiva? V'hatanya, we have a brisa, and this is going to be a relatively long brisa. So let me introduce it by explaining one of the concepts in the brisa. If you're makdish land to the Beis Hamikdash, and it's karka achuza, it's inherited land from Yehoshua. In other words, it's familial estate, but you give it to Hekdesh. If you do not redeem it from Hekdesh, when the when the next Yovel year comes, you lose it, and it goes to the Kahanim. Now, because that's the case, the Torah gives us a relatively inexpensive redemption. Okay, if it's a base saw, you have a silver shekel and a little. So let's say in American terms, it would be $1.02 per year. So if right after Shemitah year, you donate your land to the temple, it's redeemable for 50 shkolim, 49 plus the twos that added up, the little bits. If it's the 48th year, it would be 48 and most of the shekel, and so on, so that in the 49th year of Shemitah year, it would just be a little bit. Okay, in other words, 50 shekels the first Shemitah year, reduced by 1.02 each year until the next Shemitah year. And if you do not redeem it, it goes to the Kahanim. So that's a factor in this brisa. All right. Another factor in this brisa will be if you donate both trees and land, you have to redeem them individually. And we're going to basically say the sequence in which you donate affects the redemption. All right, let's try now the brisa. V'hatanya, we have a brisa. Shloisha ilan. Oh, one more concept. We learned earlier, a long time ago, that basically forests, say, is 10 trees in a base saw. Now, a cluster of 3 trees is a contiguous trees is a chashuv unit, okay? But individual trees are not as halachically significant. So all of the things I said earlier now play into this brisa. Tanya, we have a brisa that says as follows. Hekdesh shloisha ilanos. If you consecrate 3 trees, and ilanos, unqualified, means fruit trees, metame asara lebeseya. These are 3 trees from an orchard that has middle-aged trees. They're not old trees, because old trees need more land to nourish them. And they're not baby trees, because saplings need less land. But these are 3 middle-aged trees out of a cluster of 10 trees per base saw, which is the standard. Hare hektish as a karka v'es ilanos shvinein. So if you give 1 tree, you're not giving the land. If you give 2 trees, you're not giving the land. But if you give 3 or more trees, that are next to each other. No, it's not. One is not from the other side of the Beisah. They're all three together. Then the understanding is that the underlying land is also becomes hekdesh. Okay, so hare hekdesh as a karka v'es ilanos shebeneim. He's also given the land surrounding and between the trees. Okay, lefikach. Therefore, kishahu paida, when he goes through the process of reacquiring the land from the temple, because the temple doesn't want to own land. They need money to operate. So you're supposed to be paida. Paida base zera v'chaimer asarim b'chamishim shekel b'kesef. The land portion is redeemed as a ratio of this rule of a Beisea gets 50 shkolim, subtracting depending on which year it is. Literally, it means the area in which a chomer, which is a volume measure of barley seeds, can be sown. And he redeems it at the 50 shekels. Now, if it's a half a Beisea, it would be 25 shekels. In other words, the rate, or if it's a 2, it would be 100. So the ratio is both is how much land is involved and multiplied by or divided by the time involved. I hope I explained that clearly. Pachos mikan. If it's less than 3 trees, 1 or 2, od yoser al kain, or there are more than 3 trees, or the trees are spread out so that there are only 8 trees to a Beisea. Okay. Oh, shehikdishon b'vizeh chazeh. Or if on Monday he gives 1 tree and then his wife says to him, well, you're really stingy. Okay, so on Tuesday he gives another. And then his son says, Ty, there's a 3-tree rule. So on Wednesday he gives 3 trees, the 3rd tree. So then, lo hekdesh as a karka, then only the physical tree is hekdesh and the ground is not. And if there happen to be little saplings, because a seed dropped and a little tree spurted up, those are not included in the gift, the temple. Now, obviously, if the land goes, because you gave 3 trees, then the saplings would be included. Okay, lefikach, therefore, kishahu paida es ilanos v'shavyein, he does his redemption at the market value of that tree. So the market value of that tree would be a multiple of the fruit generated by the tree, what that's worth at market price, plus the salvage value of the wood of the tree. So that you can, a tree can be appraised as having a value, and he would redeem it for the value of the tree, which is considerably more than the shekel per 50 years rule. Okay. Not only that, ela afilu hekdesh as ilanos, even if he did dedicate 1 tree and then another and then another, v'chozer v'hekdesh as a karka, and then after he donated some trees to the base of Mikdash, he says, you know what? I was pretty stingy. I'm going to give the land as well. Okay, kishahu paida, when he does the redemption process, he has to do it the same sequence. Paida es ilanos b'shavyein. He has to redeem each tree at its market value, as we've explained. V'chayzer v'paida base zera chaymer sa'arim b'chamishim shekel b'kasef. And then he redeems the land based on the special pasuk of land redemption, 50 shkolim the first year of a Shemitah cycle, of a Yovel cycle, reductions accordingly. Okay? So that's the end of the Brisa. So, money. Who is the author of this Brisa? Now, just keep in mind, we're talking about giving to the temple. Rabbi Akiva says when you sell generously. The Chachamim say when you sell, you're stingy. So who does this Brisa going according to? Money. Who is that? Rabbi Akiva, if you say it goes like Rabbi Akiva, Ha'omer Macher Ba'ayin Yafa Macher. He says you sell, you give as much as you possibly can for the price you ask. You're very generous. V'kol shechein makdish. And obviously, if I'm selling it to Bobby, if I'm giving it to the temple, I would be definitely as generous as possible. Okay? So that means this Brisa can't be Rabbi Akiva. Because Rabbi Akiva says you can give the trees without giving the underlying land. That's what the Brisa says. And that's not giving generously. The Rabbanan, and if you say that the Brisa is the Rabbanan, you act stingily when you sell, so you could give just one tree and not the underlying land, but that's in a sale. But the rabbis say that when you give to the temple, you normally act generously. And here we see that he's donating the trees without the underlying land, according to the Brisa. So he's acting stingily. So it can't be the rabbis, and it can't be Rabbi Akiva. So what's the problem? So who's left to be the author of the Brisa? Elapshita Rabbi Shimon. That it's Rabbi Shimon. So now we see Rabbi Shimon differs from Rabbi Akiva. Okay, so now we're going to say that. So why does Rabbi Shimon differ? Does he you're supposed to either give generously or give stingily? Those are the two options. So could it be that he's more or less like Rabbi Akiva, but he differs in details? Or could it be he's more or less like the Rabbanan, but he differs in details? Okay, Rabbi Shimon Aliva Daman. So who, in terms of the underlying principles, does Rabbi Shimon agree with? Aliva de Rabbi Akiva, if he's basically in accord with Rabbi Akiva. Ha'omer mocha ba'ayin yafa moicher, but Rabbi Akiva is generous seller. V'kol shekain mikmakdish, and he's obviously going to be generous in giving to the temple, which this Brisa says not like that. Elapshita liba the Rabbanan. So we have to immediately reject Rabbi Akiva and say he's going like the rabbis. Because Sova Rabbi Shimon ki heichid meicher b'ayin ro'a meicher makdish nami b'ayin ro'a makdish. But Rabbi Shimon more or less agrees with the sages and says that when you sell, you give as little as possible for as much as you can get. And he says that there's no jump to generous when you donate. You also make a contribution as stingily as you can. Okay, so Maktish Nami B'ayin Ra Maktish is not a Meshayer Ara, so he can give the trees and retain possession of the underlying land. So we now see in this Brisa that Reb Shimon doesn't really agree with either, but in principle, he is this on the stingy side. And that's not like Rabbi Akiva. Okay, and also now Rav Huna had not like Rav Huna. So turn the page. The Elakasha, but we still have a problem. Hoil Yoinkon Mistay Hekdesh. We have the following issue that if you we said that when you give in our Mishnah, we said that when you give the structures on the land and if they're fruit trees or if they're a vineyard, you give that, but you do not give the carob and the sycamore. Okay, actually, it's grafted carob, but we're just going to go carob and sycamore. So the problem now would be you're retaining the carob tree or the sycamore tree, and it's being nourished from temple property. Okay, so Ella, so we add that isn't resolved yet. So let's deal with that issue. Reb Shimon l'divreihem the Rabbanan kamalahu. When Reb Shimon is the author of this brisa, he's not posketing his own viewpoint. He's saying to the rabbis, listen, even according to what you say, okay, that when you consecrate, everything goes except the sycamore and the carob. L'didi, according to me, ki heichi the moicher b'ayin ra moicher makdish nami b'ayin ra makdish. According to me, I sell as little as I can for as much as I can get. And when I make a contribution to the temple, I give as little as I can possibly get away with. That's my personal view. And therefore, when I give trees, I keep the underlying land. But you, he continues to the rabbis, lididechu, oiduli meha dalo hakdish ela charav umurkav sadan hashikma. At least you should acknowledge to me that when you give the land, you're not giving the sycamore and the kara and the what's it called? The carob tree. So therefore, that's my view, and I'm expressing this brisa in terms of your position. But the rabbis answer him back, that's not so, because there's no difference between the carob and the sycamore and the well and the wine press and the barn. When you give it all. Okay. Now, b'mayu kumta law. So, what is the basis for learning the brisa the way we do in terms of psukim? Reb Shimon, like according to Reb Shimon. Alma Seifa, let's keep going and say the rest of the brisa that we haven't yet mentioned. Okay, v'lo, the end of the brisa. Ela afilu hektish eseilanos, if you give a bunch of trees at one time, 3 or more, v'chozer, I mean sequentially. So you give one tree, then another, so it adds up to 3, but you didn't give them all at one time. So all you're giving are the trees, according to the brisa. Kishahu paida, when you redeem it, paida es ailanos b'shavyehen. First, you have to redeem the trees, each individual tree based on its actual value. V'chayzer b'paida b'sera choymer sa'orim b'chamishim shekel kesef. And then, if you want to redeem the underlying land, it goes by the standard principle, of the 50 silver shekalim for a full Shmul Yovel cycle. The Reb Shimon. So if we're saying that this whole brisa is Reb Shimon, Leizil Basar Pidyon. Okay. You can redeem something. Now, what is the principle? How do you do the redemption? Do you redeem it at the time of the redemption? So how it got to hektish is not relevant. Or do you redeem it at the time of, based on the time of consecration? So the way you dedicated it is relevant. That's the new question. Okay? the Reb Shimon, the Lezel Basar Pidyon. So let's say Reb Shimon looks at the redemption moment, and that's when you do the redemption. V'nifkedu agav arayhu. And since he's redeeming everything all at once, the trees should be irrelevant that he donated them one after the other, and he should just pay the 50 math of the 50. And the trees go along with the land. Daha Shma'in and lay the Rebbe Shimon, because in another brisa, we say that somewhere else in Shas, Reb Shimon tells us v'yazil basar pidyon, that you look at what the temple is holding at the time of the redemption, and you do your redemption as of that moment. So forget that I gave one tree and then another and then another and then the rest of the field. At the time I redeem it, it's a field with trees on it. And I redeem it on the Torah rule of the land redemption, and the trees are agav karka. The trees I get back because of the land. The sanya we have in this other brisa, minayin lalaikeya. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do two variants on my donating ancestral property to the temple. And according to Reb Shimon, we're going to ignore the variable because it's the redemption time. So if I have a living father and I buy land from him, is this considered that I bought ancestral property? Because eventually, if I didn't buy it, my father would die and I would get it. So from that standpoint, it's ancestral property. But from the other standpoint, my father's alive. So when I bought it, it wasn't ancestral property. It was a purchased land. Now, if I donate that to the temple, do I have to redeem it at the market value of land because it's not ancestral property? Or do I redeem it as if it were ancestral property because it's fit to be ancestral property? All I have to do is shoot my father, and then I'd inherit it, and it'd be ancestral property. I can't shoot him in front of witnesses. Okay, that was a joke. Okay, I buy land from my father. A man buys lands from his father. The Hegdisha, and he donates it to the temple. So it is not yet ancestral property. It's purchased from daddy. And then he gives it to the temple. Lefun of Besaida Achuza. Now, should it be treated as ancestral property at the 50 shekel rate? So Talmud Lomer, there's a pasuk that we try to apply. The imes hasada mikne, so if God gets the field, meaning you give it to Hekdesh, asher lo besoda achuza, so that is not ancestral. But that pasuk, you could chop out some of the words. If you give non-ancestral property, if God acquires property and it turns out not to be ancestral, is extra verbosity. Okay, so that's important. So that's what the pasuk says, and we learn the pasuk like this: land that isn't fit to be ancestral property. I don't buy it from my father. I buy it from Marty. Marty's property is not, we're not in the same shevet even. So, he's Binyamin, I'm Yehuda. So it's not ancestral. Then I would just have to buy it back at market value. Yatzizu, to exclude. Sharuya Leo said to exclude land. That even if it's not ancestral at this moment, because I got it from my father, but he's still living, if he died, it would be ancestral. So it's roy to be ancestral. Okay, and the pasuk excludes that case. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon. That is how both Rabbi Yehuda, and for our purposes, what's important is so does Rabbi Shimon interpret the pasuk like that. Rabbi Meir Aimer, Minayin Lilakeach Soda Aviv. How do you know that if you buy the land from your father, and your father dies first, and then you give it to Hektish? Okay. Minayin shitahela fun of Kisteicha Chuza, that the temple treats it as if it's ancestral property and gives it back for the special price listed in the Torah, 50 shkalim subtract for each year. The im esaida mekanaso asher lo mesaida achuzaso. He uses a pasuk. So according to Reb Meir, we interpret the verbosity of the pasuk so the she'ena soda achuzasa shehi soda achuzasa shehi soda achuzasa, that it's not ancestral property, and since he sold it while his father was still alive, it remains not ancestral property, and he has to pay the going rate to redeem it. The Ilu Rebbe Yehuda Rebbe Shimon. Now, if the extra words are saying that if it's someday going to be ancestral, the temple treats it now as ancestral, and that's what Reb Shimon says, skip the next few words. Heiche hekdisha v'akar kach meis aviv kisoda achu damya. And so even though the father died after he donated it, so it wasn't ancestral, but had he not donated it, it would have become ancestral. So it's fit to be ancestral, and the temple lets him redeem it for the special bargain rate. Menolahu. How do Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda derive that from the pasuk? If it's from that pasuk, the extra words, Ema Rebbe Meir Huda Asa. Somebody could come along and say to them, you can't interpret that way, because Rebbe Meir already used up all those extra words with his interpretation. Elalav. So what do we have to say? Mishum da'azle basar pidyon. That you have to look at this whole story as what are the facts at the time of redemption. Doesn't matter if the father died before or after. Right now, the land is in the hands of the temple, and if the guy had not given it or he redeems it, it's ancestral property. So the complexity of interpreting the pasuk is thrown out, and we simply look at it. The moment of pidyon, what's the deal? Okay, so that would be how Reb Shimon explains it. But now the problem is, if that's the case, okay, if we say that Reb Shimon only looks at the time of pidyon, then the whole brisa we just read can't be Reb Shimon, because the brisa in the first half said that it's critically important how many trees you give at a time. If you give all three, then the land goes to, et cetera, et cetera. But if you give one tree at a time, the land does not go. So obviously, if that's Reb Shimon, he's talking about the time of dedication, not the time of redemption. So we got a new problem. So to resolve that new problem, we're going to explain it that it still could be Reb Shimon. Omer Reb Nachman bar Yitzchak, li'aylam ba'alma Reb Yehuda Reb Shimon lo azle basar pidyon. That Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, but mostly Rabbi Shimon, does not say that it's the redemption moment that counts. Hacha kara ashkechu v'darush, And they do use the pasuk we refer to with the verbosity of the pasuk to say that if it could be ancestral property, it is ancestral property. Imkain, and if that's the case, Lichtav Kra, the pasuk should have said a simpler pasuk. Im esayde mekansei asher lo achuzah. So if God gets a field that's not the donor's ancestral property, a simpler pasuk. Inami sada achuzasa, or the pasuk could have said simply, he donates non-inheritable property. So why does the pasuk have all those extra words? Es she'ein re'uya said achuza, that it means that the full price applies only to land that could not be ancestral property because it was not held in the family to begin with. So the Yatzazu, and therefore we exclude from paying full price for redemption, to land that is that could be ancestral had he not donated it and inherited it in normal course of events. Now we'll come back to Rav Huna. And we see, if we've been paying attention carefully, we see that carobs and sycamores are unique. Because if I donate or sell donate a field of fruit trees, they go. And if I donate a field with carob, they don't go. So we see a uniqueness to carobs and sycamores. So we're going to deal with that uniqueness. Omer Rav Huna, Charav v'hamurkav sadin hashikma, grafted carobs or trimmed sycamores, Tyrus Elon olav v'Tyrus karka olav. In some regards, it's thought of as a tree. And in some regards, it's thought of as real property. Okay? Tyrus Elon olav, it's like a tree. The Heicha v'aktish ozavin shnei ilanos v'hai. If I give to the temple or I sell to Bob 2 fruit trees, plus the sycamore tree, which is next, right next to the 2 fruit trees. So it's, on the one hand, it's a cluster of 3 trees. And in the Brisa, we said that a cluster of 3 trees, the land goes. So 1 sycamore plus 2 fruit trees equals 3 trees. So in that regard, it's a tree. Okay? Okay. Ilanos, okay. But Yeshlo Karka, in another regard, it's considered more like land. Tyrus Karka, olav, the land explanation, Delo Mizavin Agavara, that it doesn't travel, doesn't get sold along with the land. Now, that sounds like funny because if it's land, it should, right? But what it means is, we learned, if I sell you the North 40, but I describe it, I'm selling you my land, my 40 acres, you do not acquire the rest of my holdings. You only get the piece of land we're talking about. So if I sell you land, what?
Why would you think any differently?
Because if I sell you land with a well on it, there's an argument whether you get the well or you don't. But everybody agrees, if I sell you land with a sycamore on it, you do not get the sycamore. So in the sense that the sycamore is like an adjacent piece of property, you wouldn't think if you buy 10-10 Yarmouth-A that you're getting 10-12 also. You wouldn't think that. So if you're buying the underlying land, you're not getting the tree. In that sense, the tree is sort of like land. Okay? Now, I think we're going to stop there because the next piece is it gets if we think it's complicated heretofore, it gets much more complicated. So we'll do that tomorrow.
It's well done.
Okay.
Go to the end of the paragraph.
What?
You don't want to go.
I don't. When's the period end? I'm telling you, it gets very tricky, and nobody else is. Half the people left.
Right.
So it's a whole new topic. All right. Well, we'll see what happens.
Okay.
And hopefully Shimon will be back before I butcher it too much. What's going on?
Good. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I would say my pleasure, but that would be an untruth.
You mean it wasn't fun for you?
Sometimes it's fun, but sometimes I have to do it 3 times to figure out what the heck it's talking about. And
the Oilem understood much.
I can do Shabbos this week, I think,
Oh, yeah.
if he's not here, because I bought a scooter.
Oh.
Imagine Mordechai flying around the village in that scooter.
It doesn't fly.
No?
No.
Where'd you buy it from?
It's a new scooter. It's not one of those big Amigos. It's a smaller scooter, and it folds up to the size of a suitcase.
Really?
And it's much lighter, and it's got a better, whatever, in quotes, Shabbos function.
Uh-huh.
It works because you're not actually, with the Amigo, you turn it on.
Right.
With this thing, you turn it on Friday afternoon.
Uh-huh.
And so you're eliminating a step
Who gives
of
the
head there. What?
Who gives the head?
Well, it was developed by Tzomet, but with the difference is that this one was developed lechatchila,
Uh-huh.
and Rav Heinemann gave his hechsher to it, which he does not with the other one.
Could you hop on this scooter?
What?
The second person hop on the scooter?
No, it only holds 270. So I could take a little kid on my lap, but not you.
What, you have to leave it on, it's on all Shabbos.
You
day.
turn it on Friday afternoon and you turn it off Saturday night.
So
And you leave it on.
And that's to be well charged.
Well, I have 2 batteries, one for regular Shabbos and a bulkier battery for the 3-day stretches.
Oh, all right.
all right. Hey,
That's not the rubber. Don't get any speeding tickets.
Yes. Well, I think I'll have it. He's supposed to deliver it today.
Huh? All right.
So if he does, and I figure out how to use it properly, I can do it Shabbos.
Oh, you're buying it from an individual?
No, I'm buying it from a company, but the company is made up of people. So one of said people is delivering it. They're actually right down south on Lyons Road, 5 miles is where the place is.
I have to talk to you about that.
It's $4,200 with the fancy battery, and and it's very light, and it's not as big. You might think about getting it.
Maybe.
I'll show it to you when I get it.
Let him take a test drive.
I'm at the point where I need something.
I understand, and then you could come to me for recognition. No, I understand. I decided, I'm gonna skip the walker. Cause why should I struggle with the walker when I'm gonna in a half a year get the scooter anyway? But I don't understand.
Okay.
Yeah. On the X-ray, and that's very. All right, have a wonderful day.
And you too.